Hey guys, tonight we are crouching in the dark. The air is cold, thick with the smell of dust, campfires, and thousands of camels. Below you, sprawled across the valley floor, is a city of tents, an ocean of armed men who have spent the last 7 years making your life a living hell. You have a clay pot in one hand, a torch inside it, a ram's horn trumpet in the other. You are one of 300. They are 135,000. Do the math. Frankly, you probably won't survive this. The odds aren't just bad, they're a statistical joke. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I love seeing where you're all listening from, so drop your city or country and the local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see our community spread across the globe. The ground is hard and cracked beneath your feet, the color of old bone. For 7 years, this has been your world. Not a world of seasons, but a world of a single, agonizing cycle. The brief, desperate hope of planting, followed by the certainty of plunder. You live your life in the shadows, in the cracks of the earth. The text calls them dens, caves, and strongholds in the mountains. But what does that really mean? It means you've abandoned your home. The stone and mud brick house your grandfather built, the one with the courtyard where your children used to play, is a hollowed-out shell, a silent testament to your failure. Your new home is a damp fissure in a limestone cliff, the entrance covered with a thorny bush, the air inside smelling of mildew, fear, and too many bodies crammed into too small a space. It means when your child cries in the night, your first instinct isn't comfort, but a panicked hand over their mouth to stifle the sound. It means you measure wealth, not in sheep or goats. Those were taken long ago. But in handfuls of grain you managed to bury before the locusts came. And the locusts always come. They aren't insects. They are men. The Midianites, the Amalekites, and a faceless horde known only as the Benikedim, the people of the East. They come not as a disciplined army marching to conquer, but as a human tidal wave, a plague of consumption. They pour out of the eastern deserts, a moving city of black tents and snarling camels. Their numbers so vast the Bible says they were like locusts in abundance, and their camels were without number, as the sand that is on the seashore in abundance. Imagine that sight. You're on a hillside, looking down into the valley of Jezreel, the breadbasket of Israel. One day it's green with the promise of wheat and barley. The next, it is a churning, chaotic sea of brown and black. The earth itself seems to groan under the weight of them. The air fills with the bleating of their stolen flocks, the grunting of their camels, the shouts of men in a language you don't understand, and the smoke from 1,000 campfires that chokes the sky and blots out the sun. They don't just take the harvest, they take everything. They cut down the olive trees that take a generation to grow. They poison the wells. They take the oxen you need to plow, the donkeys you need to carry what little you have left. They are not conquerors who want to rule you. They are predators who want to erase you. They leave nothing behind. No grain for bread. No seed for the next planting. No lamb to sacrifice. No hope for 7 years. Think about the psychological toll of that. 7 years is a long time. A child born at the beginning of this oppression is now a boy who has never known a full meal, who has never seen his father stand up straight. He has only known hunger as a constant companion and fear as the air he breathes. The men and women of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, the people who were promised a land flowing with milk and honey, are reduced to scavengers in their own home. They are troglodytes, cave dwellers, hiding from the light. The stories of their ancestors, the mighty deeds of the Lord who split the sea and brought down the walls of Jericho, must have sounded like cruel jokes, like fairy tales told to mock their present misery. Where was that God now? This is the question that hangs in the suffocating air of the caves. And in the absence of an answer from Yahweh, the God of their fathers, they turned elsewhere. In their desperation, they looked to the gods of the land they inhabited, the very gods their ancestors had been commanded to obliterate. They turned to Baal. Baal was the god of the storm, the rider of the clouds, the bringer of rain. In an agrarian world, rain is life. Baal was the god of fertility, the one who made the crops grow and the flocks multiply. When your fields are barren and your livestock are gone, the appeal of a god who promises fertility is almost irresistible. And they turned to Asherah, his consort, the mother goddess, represented by a wooden pole or a sacred tree, a symbol of life and nourishment. On the high places, under the shade of green trees, they built altars of stone and erected carved wooden poles. They bowed down. They offered what little they had. They prayed for rain. They prayed for protection. They prayed for an end to their suffering. And in doing so, they broke the very first commandment of the covenant that defined them as a people. You shall have no other gods before me. Their suffering was not random. It was the direct consequence of their spiritual adultery. They had abandoned their God, and in return, they had been abandoned to the mercy of their enemies. Their political and military problem was, at its root, a theological one. They were starving not just for bread, but for a reason to believe. They had become a people without a king, without a priest, without a God they could trust. And so, after 7 years of this grinding, soul-crushing existence, they finally did the one thing they had failed to do. They cried out to the Lord. It might not have been a cry of pure-hearted repentance. It was more likely the desperate, guttural scream of a people at the absolute end of their rope, a people with nowhere else to turn. They had tried the caves. They had tried Baal. Nothing worked. And so, they cried out to the God they had forsaken. And God answered. But he didn't send a warrior. He didn't send an army. He sent a voice. A nameless prophet appears on the scene with a message that is not one of comfort, but of searing conviction. Imagine him, a gaunt figure in a dusty robe, standing before a group of starving, frightened people. They are desperate for a savior, for a promise of deliverance. Instead, he gives them a history lesson. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, he begins, his voice echoing with an authority they haven't heard in years. I brought you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of slavery. He reminds them of their miraculous birth as a nation, of the power that freed them from the greatest empire on earth. He doesn't let them forget. I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you and gave you their land. He recounts the conquest, the fulfillment of the promise, the sheer gift of the ground beneath their feet. He's reminding them that their very existence is a miracle, a product of divine intervention. And then comes the indictment, the sharp turn from history to accusation. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. Here is the covenant, the one condition for all this blessing. And then the hammer blow, the simple, devastating conclusion. But you have not obeyed my voice. There is no, don't worry, everything will be okay. There is no, I'm sending a hero to save you. There is only a diagnosis. You are sick, and this is the reason why. Your pain is a self-inflicted wound. You have worshipped the gods of the people I drove out for you, the very gods who proved powerless to save their own people from destruction. You have chosen impotence over omnipotence. You have traded the God of liberation for the gods of the land. And now the land itself is betraying you through the hands of your enemies. The prophet's message is brutal, but necessary. It forces Israel to look inward, to understand that the Midianites are not the disease, they are merely the symptom. The disease is the rot in their own hearts. Before any salvation can occur, they must first understand the depth of their own sin. The prophet then disappears from the story as quickly as he arrived, his message left to hang in the air. A bitter medicine for a people on the verge of death. Now the scene shifts. The camera zooms in from the wide shot of a nation's suffering to a tight focus on one man. His name is Gideon, son of Joash the Abizrite. We find him not on a battlefield, not in a council of elders, but in a place of profound humiliation. He is in a winepress, thrashing wheat. To understand the significance of this, you have to know how these two things work. A winepress was a pit, often carved out of rock, with a lower basin to collect the juice from trampled grapes. It's a hole in the ground. Thrashing, on the other hand, was the process of beating grain to separate the edible kernels from the useless husk, the chaff. It was always done on a high, open-air thrashing floor, a flat, elevated space where the wind could catch the mixture as it was tossed into the air. The heavy grain would fall straight down, while the light, worthless chaff would blow away. It was a public, visible, and efficient process, a symbol of a bountiful harvest. Gideon is doing this vital task in a hole in the ground. He is hiding. He is down in a pit, likely sweating in the airless space, flailing at a small pile of wheat, trying to beat out a few grains for his family to eat without being seen by a passing Midianite patrol. Every swing of his flail is an act of fear. Every grain he saves is a victory against starvation. This is not a hero. This is a man defined by the oppression. He is the perfect embodiment of Israel's condition. Beaten down, hiding in a hole, just trying to survive. And it is into this pit of fear and despair that heaven intrudes. An angel of the Lord appears and sits under the terebinth tree at Ophrah, which belonged to Gideon's father. The angel doesn't announce himself with a flash of light or a chorus of trumpets. He just appears, a stranger sitting under a tree, watching. Then he speaks, and his words are so wildly incongruous with the situation that they are almost comical. He looks at this man, cowering in a pit, secretly thrashing a pathetic amount of wheat, and says, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." Let those words sink in. Mighty man of valor, Gibber Hihale in the Hebrew. It's a term for a warrior, a champion, a man of great strength and courage. The angel looks at Gideon, the very picture of fear and weakness, and calls him a hero. This is the divine perspective. God does not see Gideon as he is, but as he could be, as he was created to be. It's a call to a new identity. It's a spark dropped into the tinder of a broken man's soul. But Gideon is not ready to accept this new identity. He is steeped in 7 years of bitter reality. He doesn't look up with hope. He looks up with the accumulated anger and disillusionment of his generation. His response is not one of humble piety. It is a raw, cynical, and deeply honest complaint. "Please, sir," he says, the politeness barely masking the sarcasm. "If the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to's? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers told us about, saying, 'Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt?'" This is the voice of a man whose faith has been shattered by experience. The stories are just stories. The miracles are in the past. The God of his fathers is a distant, mythological figure who has no bearing on the brutal reality of his life. He ends his tirade with a devastating conclusion. "But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian." He doesn't just feel abandoned, he states it as a fact. God is gone. He has left us to die. This is one of the most painfully human moments in the entire Bible. Gideon is not just asking a theological question. He is venting the deep, agonizing cry of a suffering soul. Why does a good God allow bad things to happen to his people? It's a question that echoes down through the centuries. And the angel doesn't offer a philosophical treatise in response. He doesn't try to explain the problem of evil. Instead, the Lord for the narrative now shifts from the angel to Yahweh himself speaking through him, looks at him, and gives him a command. "Go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you?" Might. What strength is he talking about? The strength of a man thrashing wheat in a winepress? No. The might God is referring to is the very thing Gideon just displayed. His passionate, angry, disillusioned honesty. His might is his deep discontent with the way things are. His strength is his longing for the God of the stories to be the God of the now. His power lies in his weakness, a weakness that is so profound it forces him to depend on something greater. God is essentially saying, that fire in your belly, that holy frustration, that's what I'm going to use. Now go. Gideon, of course, is overwhelmed. The call is too big, and he feels too small. He immediately defaults to the classic response of the called, excuses. "Please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." He's from a minor tribe, from a minor family within that tribe, and he's the runt of the litter. He is, by his his own estimation, a nobody from nowhere. It's a statement of profound insecurity, born from a culture where lineage and status meant everything. In a world of warriors and patriarchs, he is insignificant, and God's response to this litany of inadequacy is simple and profound. It bypasses all of Gideon's excuses and goes to the heart of the matter. But I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man. God doesn't argue with Gideon's assessment of himself. He doesn't say, "No, you're not weak, you're strong." He says, "You're right, you are weak. But it doesn't matter, because I will be with you." The source of the victory will not be Gideon's strength, his clan's prominence, or his family's status. The source of the victory will be the presence of God. This is the foundational principle of the entire story. The outcome is determined not by the quality of the instrument, but by the power of the hand that wields it. Even with this promise, Gideon is hesitant. He is a man who needs proof. The stories are not enough. He needs to see it for himself. He asks for a sign, a confirmation that it is truly God speaking to him. He says, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it is you who speak with me. Please do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my present and set it before you." He offers to prepare a meal, an act of hospitality that doubles as a test. The angel agrees to wait. Gideon rushes off and prepares an extravagant offering for a man in his impoverished state, a young goat, and unleavened cakes from an ephah of flour, over 20 liters of it. This is not a simple snack. It is a costly sacrifice, a feast. He brings the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot and presents it to the angel under the tree. The angel then instructs him, "Take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock and pour the broth over them." Gideon obeys. What follows is the sign he asked for, a moment of divine power breaking into the mundane world. The angel of the Lord touched the meat and the cakes with the tip of the staff that was in his hand. And fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened cakes. And the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. In that flash of supernatural fire, Gideon understands. This was no mere messenger. This was a divine being, and his reaction is not joy, but terror. "Alas, O Lord God, for I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." In ancient Hebrew thought, to see God directly was to die. No mortal could withstand the full weight of divine holiness. Gideon is convinced his life is over. He has trespassed, seen what should not be seen, and now he expects judgment. But instead of a voice of condemnation, a voice of peace comes to him. "Peace be to you," the Lord says. "Do not fear, you shall not die." In this moment of profound relief, the terror gives way to worship. Gideon builds an altar there to the Lord and calls it Yahweh Shalom. The Lord is peace. This is the first tangible result of his encounter. Where there was fear, now there is peace. Where there was doubt, now there is a place of worship. The man who was hiding in a pit, convinced God had abandoned him, now has a personal monument to the reality of God's peaceful presence. But the encounter is not over. That very night, God gives Gideon his first mission, and it is not a mission against the Midianites. It is a mission against his own family, his own community. God says to him, "Take your father's bull and the second bull 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal that your father has, and cut down the Asherah pole that is beside it." This is a radical, dangerous command. God is telling Gideon to commit an act of public sacrilege and treason. He is to destroy the religious icons of his own father, the symbols of his community's chosen form of worship. This isn't just about theology. It's about family honor, community stability, and political power. The local altar to Baal would have been the center of the town's religious and social life, and it belonged to his father, Josh, who was likely a town elder. The command continues, "And build an altar to the Lord your God on the top of the stronghold here, with stones laid in due order. Then take the second bull and offer it as a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah pole that you shall cut down." The symbolism is potent and provocative. He is not just to destroy the symbols of false worship. He is to use their remains as fuel for the worship of the true God. He is to build Yahweh's altar on the high place, directly over the ruins of Baal's, a statement of absolute supremacy. He is to take the wood of the goddess Asherah and use it as common firewood for a sacrifice to Yahweh. It's an act of ultimate contempt for these false gods, and the bull he is to sacrifice is specifically the second bull 7 years old, which many scholars believe was a bull that had been fattened and consecrated for sacrifice to Baal, perhaps in a ceremony to mark the 7 years of Midianite oppression. God is demanding that the very thing dedicated to Baal be offered to him instead. Gideon understands the immense danger of this task. The text is clear. So Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his father's household and the men of the town to do it by day, he did it by night. Once again, Gideon's fear is not glossed over. He is still afraid. The mighty man of valor is terrified. But this time, his obedience is stronger than his fear. He gathers his trusted servants, and under the cover of darkness, he carries out this divine sabotage. Imagine the scene: the quiet of the night, the muffled sounds of stone being toppled, the sharp crack of an axe biting into the wood of the Asherah pole, the hurried construction of a new altar, the tense and bloody work of sacrificing a bull, all done in secret, with every man glancing over his shoulder, expecting to be discovered at any moment. When the townspeople wake up in the morning, they are met with a scene of sacrilege. Their sacred site has been desecrated. The altar to Baal is a pile of rubble. The Asherah pole is gone, and in their place stands a new altar with the remains of a fresh sacrifice still smoking on it. There is immediate outrage. Who has done this thing? They demand. An investigation begins, and it doesn't take long to trace the act back to its source. Gideon, the son of Josh, has done this thing. A mob forms. They descend on the house of Josh, their rage palpable. Their demand is simple and brutal. Bring out your son, that he may die, because he has pulled down the altar of Baal and cut down the Asherah that was beside it. They are ready to execute him for his crime against their God. This is the moment of truth. This is Gideon's first real battle, and his opponents are not Midianites, but his own neighbors, his own friends, his own kin. His life hangs in the balance, and it depends on his father, the very man whose authority and religion he has just publicly defied. And then Josh, the owner of the desecrated altar, does something remarkable. He steps forward to face the angry crowd. Instead of condemning his son, he defends him. And his defense is a masterpiece of cutting logic and public shamming. "Will you contend for Baal?" he asks them, his voice ringing out over the angry shouts. "Or will you save him?" He turns their religious fervor back on them. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been pulled down. The brilliance of this argument cannot be overstated. He is essentially saying, you are angry on behalf of your God. You are trying to fight Baal's battles for him. But if Baal is truly a god, if he has any power at all, shouldn't he be able to defend his own honor? Let Baal be the one to strike Gideon down. If he can't, then what kind of god is he? He exposes the impotence of their idol with a single, unanswerable challenge. He reduces their mighty storm god to a helpless block of wood and stone. The crowd is silenced. They have no answer. Josh's quick thinking not only saves Gideon's life, but also shatters the local confidence in Baal. And out of this confrontation, Gideon receives a new name. Josh declares, "Let Baal contend against him." And from that day on, Gideon is called Jerubbaal. It's a name of defiance, a title of honor earned in his first victory. He is no longer just Gideon, the frightened farmer in the winepress. He is Jerubbaal, the man who challenged a false god and survived, the man who God is with. The internal enemy, the spiritual rot within his own town, has been confronted and defeated. The thrashing floor of despair has become a place of confrontation and victory. The first, most difficult step has been taken. But as the dust settles in Ophrah, the larger threat remains. The locusts are gathering again in the valley, and the real war is about to begin. The night air in Ophrah still carries the faint, acrid smell of burnt sacrifice from the new altar, a scent of obedience and revolution. But the personal victory, the toppling of a local idol, feels impossibly small in the face of what is coming. Word travels on the wind, carried by merchants and shepherds, that the Midianites are stirring again. This is not another raid, this is an invasion. They are gathering in force, along with their perennial allies, the Amalekites and the people of the east. They pour across the Jordan River, a relentless tide of humanity and livestock, and make their camp in the valley of Jezreel. The valley, a wide, fertile plain that should be the heart of Israel's prosperity, becomes their staging ground. It is a strategic act of intimidation, a clear message. This land is ours, its bounty is ours, and your lives are forfeit. They are not hiding. They are displaying their power, daring anyone to challenge them. For Gideon, the man now known as Jerubbaal, the destroyer of Baal, this is the moment where the divine promise meets the terrifying reality. The personal has become national. And it is here that something profound happens. The scripture says, "The Spirit of the Lord clothed itself with Gideon." This is a powerful and intimate image. It's not that the Spirit descended on him, like a bird landing on a shoulder. It is that the Spirit put him on like a garment. Gideon becomes the instrument, the human vessel through which the divine will is about to act. Imagine that sensation. The fear that has been his constant companion for 7 years does not simply vanish, but it is now enveloped by something infinitely greater. The trembling hands become steady. The doubtful mind becomes resolute. The man who hid in a winepress is now wrapped in the mantle of divine power. And with this new anointing, he acts. He sounds the shofar, the ram's horn trumpet. Its raw, piercing cry slices through the air, a sound that is at once a call to worship and a call to war. It's a signal that resonates deep in the soul of his people, a sound their ancestors heard at Sinai and at Jericho. The call goes out first to his own clan, the Israelites, the very people who, just days before, wanted to kill him. Now, witnessing his courage and the impotence of their former god, they rally to his side. The first few are always the hardest, but they come. Then he sends messengers, runners fanning out through the rugged hills of the surrounding tribal territories. They carry the urgent message to Manasseh, his greater tribe, and north to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. These were the northern tribes, the ones most directly in the path of the Midianite onslaught, the ones who had suffered the most. And the people respond. From hidden valleys and mountain strongholds, they emerge. They are not a professional army. They are farmers, shepherds, vintners. They come with whatever weapons they have managed to keep hidden from the Midianite patrols. A rusty sickle beaten into a crude sword, a shepherd's sling, a sharpened ox goad, perhaps a treasured spear passed down from a grandfather who remembered a time of freedom. They are gaunt, their faces etched with the lines of hunger and hardship. But in their eyes, there is a flicker of hope, something that has been absent for 7 long years. They gather to Gideon at the spring of Harod, which means trembling. It is a fitting name for this assembly of the desperate and the brave. They look up at the hill of Moor, where the Midianite camp sprawls like a festering wound across the valley floor, and they tremble. But they have come. By the thousands, they have come. The count is taken. 32,000 men. 32,000 against an enemy numbered at 135,000. The odds are still formidable, worse than 4-1. But for the Israelites, seeing their own numbers swell to such a size is a heady feeling. For the first time in 7 years, they are not a scattered, hiding remnant. They are an army. A spirit of defiance, of national pride, begins to ripple through the camp. They look at their own strength, their sheer mass, and they begin to believe that victory might just be possible. They look at Gideon, the man who defied Baal, and they see a charismatic leader, a hero in the making. They begin to put their trust in the size of their battalions, in the courage of their new general. And that is precisely the problem. God sees this nascent pride, this flicker of self-reliance, and knows it is a spiritual poison. The entire point of this deliverance is not to show Israel how strong they can be, but to show them how powerful he is. The victory must be so beyond the realm of human explanation that only God can receive the glory. And so, he speaks to Gideon, and his words must have felt like a punch to the gut. The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, "My own hand has saved me." Imagine Gideon's reaction. Too many. He looks at the sea of Midianite tents, a city of warriors that dwarfs his own assembly. He does the math again and again. How can they be too many? Any sane military commander would be frantically trying to recruit more soldiers, not looking for ways to downsize. This is strategic madness. It runs counter to every human instinct, every principle of warfare. God's logic is not the logic of generals and kings. It is the logic of faith. The primary enemy in this story is not Midian. It is Israel's pride. And God is about to perform radical surgery on that pride. But before Gideon acts on this insane command, his own human frailty surfaces again. He is clothed in the Spirit, yes, but the man inside the garment is still Gideon. He needs one more confirmation, a final, tangible sign that this path, this impossible strategy, is truly from God. He is about to lead men to their deaths, and he needs to be absolutely certain of his commission. His request is humble, specific, and deeply agricultural. It's the request of a man of the earth. He says to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said, behold, I am laying a fleece of wool on the thrashing floor. If there is dew on the fleece alone, and it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know that you will save Israel by my hand." This is a test of God's control over the microenvironment. Dew is a natural phenomenon, a product of temperature and humidity that settles uniformly over a cool surface. Gideon is asking God to defy the laws of nature in a small, contained space. He is asking for a targeted miracle. He goes to sleep, his heart likely pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. And when he rises early in the morning, he goes to the thrashing floor. The ground around it is dusty and dry. He reaches down and picks up the fleece. It is saturated, heavy with moisture. He wrings it out, and a full bowl of water collects from the wool. The sign has been given. God has answered. But the human heart is a complex thing. A sign that confirms a terrifying mission can sometimes produce more anxiety, not less. Now Gideon knows. He knows he has to follow this path of radical reduction. And a new doubt, a new permutation of fear creeps in. Was that sign a fluke? A freak atmospheric condition? Is it harder for dew to form on a woolly fleece than on the hard-packed earth? Perhaps what he saw was a natural, if unusual, event. He needs a sign that is not just supernatural, but counternatural. So he asks again, and he is almost apologetic about it. "Let not your anger burn against me. Let me speak just once more. Please let me test just once more with the fleece. Please let it be dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground let there be dew." This is a much harder test. Wool naturally absorbs moisture from the air. To keep a fleece bone dry while the ground all around it is wet with dew requires an even more precise and deliberate act of divine power. It's like asking for a small patch of desert in the middle of a rain shower. God, in his patience, condescends to Gideon's need for certainty. That night, the miracle is reversed. The next morning, the entire thrashing floor, the packed earth, and the stray bits of chaff are damp with dew. But the fleece is perfectly, miraculously dry. Gideon now has his double confirmation. There can be no more doubt. His path is set. He must obey, no matter how illogical the command seems. He stands before his army of 32,000 hopeful men, takes a deep breath, and makes the most demoralizing announcement a commander could possibly make. Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead. This is the first filter. It is a test of courage. There must have been a stunned silence. They had all come this far. They had answered the call. But now they are being given an official, honorable discharge for the very thing they are all feeling: fear. A man looks at his neighbor. He sees the sweat on his brow, the tremor in his hand as he grips his spear. He feels his own stomach churning, his own knees threatening to buckle as he looks at the endless Midianite camp. He thinks of his wife and children hiding in their cave. If he dies here, who will protect them? Who will provide for them? The commander himself has given him a way out. No shame, no punishment, just permission to go home. One man at the back of the crowd quietly puts down his spear, turns, and begins the long walk home. Then another follows. A small trickle becomes a stream, then a river, then a flood. Men are peeling away from the ranks, their initial burst of bravado evaporating under the harsh light of reality. They are not cowards, not in the absolute sense. They are ordinary men who have been brutalized for 7 years, and they are terrified. God is not interested in forcing terrified men to fight. He is looking for a willing heart. Gideon watches as his army dissolves before his eyes. The sight must have been crushing. Every man who leaves diminishes their chances of victory, at least by human standards. He watches as 10,000 men remain. And then he watches as 22,000 men walk away. 2/3 of his army is gone. In a single announcement, he has gone from being outnumbered 4-1 to being outnumbered more than 13-1. The 10,000 who remain are the brave ones, or at least the ones whose commitment is stronger than their fear. They watch their comrades depart, and a new sense of grim resolve settles over them. They are the few, the proud, the remnant. They have passed the test, but God is not finished. He looks at the 10,000 resolute warriors, the elite corps that has been sifted from the larger mass, and he says to Gideon, "The people are still too many." This must have been the cruelest blow of all. The first reduction was understandable, even if it was militarily risky. Culling the fearful makes a certain kind of sense. But these 10,000 are the best he has. These are the men who did not tremble. To reduce the army further seems not just counterintuitive, but suicidal. Yet the command is clear. The reason is the same. Lest Israel boast. 10,000 men, with a brilliant commander, pulling off a surprise attack against a complacent foe, could still conceivably claim the victory for themselves. the story would be about their bravery, their strategy. God is determined to erase any possibility of human glory. The number has to be so ridiculously small that victory can only be attributed to a miracle. So God gives Gideon the instructions for the second test, a test that is far stranger and more subtle than the first. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. The spring of Harod, where they are camped, provides the perfect setting. Gideon marches his 10,000 remaining soldiers down to the edge of the water. They are hot, thirsty, their throats caked with the dust of the valley. The cool, clear water is an irresistible temptation. And the Lord said to Gideon, "Everyone who laps the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink." This is the test. It is not a test of strength or courage or skill with a sword. It is a test of how a man drinks water. Imagine the scene. 10,000 thirsty men descend upon the spring. The vast majority of them, driven by their thirst, do the most natural thing in the world. They cast their spears and shields aside, fall to their knees, and plunge their faces directly into the water, drinking deeply and greedily. They are oblivious to their surroundings, their focus entirely on quenching their thirst. Their posture is one of complete vulnerability. An enemy patrol coming over the rise would find them defenseless, their heads down, their weapons out of reach. For a few moments, their personal comfort has completely eclipsed their military awareness. They are satisfying a need, but they have forgotten they are at war. 9,700 men drink this way, but a small group does something different. They do not kneel. They do not set aside their weapons. They remain standing, or perhaps in a low crouch, ever watchful. They cup the water in one hand and bring it up to their mouths, lapping it from their hand like a dog might lap from a bowl. Their heads remain up. Their eyes are constantly scanning the horizon, watching the ridges, watching their own flanks. Their weapon remains in their other hand, ready. Even in the simple act of drinking, they do not let down their guard. They are the vigilant ones. Their thirst is real, but their sense of duty, their awareness of the imminent danger, is greater. They are the ones who understand that in enemy territory, you are never truly at ease. Every moment is a moment of potential conflict. Every action must be filtered through the lens of combat readiness, and there are only 300 of them. The test reveals a fundamental difference in mindset. It separates the soldier from the civilian. It sifts out the merely brave from the professionally aware. The 9,700 are good men, courageous men who refuse to go home. But the 300 are a different breed. They possess an ingrained, instinctual situational awareness. This is the quality God is looking for. Not brute strength, but unwavering readiness. There are other interpretations of this test. Some have suggested that lapping like a dog was considered a more humble, even humiliating posture, and God chose the most humble. Others believe the test was entirely arbitrary, that God could have separated them based on the color of their eyes or whether they were left-handed. In this view, the method was unimportant. The only goal was to arrive at an absurdly small number. But the interpretation that resonates most strongly with the military context of the story is that of vigilance. God was selecting a small, elite special forces unit, men who were always on alert, always ready. These were the men he could trust with a mission that would require precision, stealth, and nerves of steel. God's voice comes to Gideon again, confirming the result. With the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hand. And let all the other people go, every man to his home. Gideon now has the agonizing task of sending the other 9,700 men away. Imagine the confusion and humiliation of these brave soldiers. They had passed the first test. They had not been afraid. They had pledged their lives to this cause. And now they are being sent home because of how they drank water. It makes no sense. They must have felt rejected, dishonored. They watch as Gideon separates the tiny group of 300 from the rest. They are forced to turn their backs on the battle and return to their villages, their heads hung low, to explain to their families that they were dismissed for failing a test they didn't even know they were taking. It is a final, brutal stripping away of any human logic or pride. The sun begins to set. The vast camp of the Israelites, once teeming with 32,000 men, is now eerily quiet. The campfires of the dismissed soldiers have gone dark. All that remains is one man, Gideon, and his bizarre little company of 300 waterlappers. He looks at his army. It's not an army, it's a raiding party, a suicide squad. 300 men. He looks across the valley at the enemy camp. The Midianites are still there, spread out in the valley like locusts in abundance. Their camels as numberless as the sand on the seashore. The odds have shifted from a difficult 4-1 to a desperate 13-1 to a statistically impossible 450-1. Every ounce of human wisdom, every military textbook ever written, would scream that this is not a battle, it is a slaughter. There is no strategy that can make these numbers work. There is no amount of courage that can overcome such a deficit. The reduction is complete. The stage is now perfectly set for a miracle. All human hope has been systematically dismantled. All trust in numbers, in courage, in military prowess has been stripped away. All that is left is Gideon, his 300 watchful men, and the naked promise of God. The test at the water's edge is over, and the time for battle is at hand. The darkness that settles over the valley of Jezreel is absolute. The moon is a sliver, offering no comfort, and the stars are cold, distant sparks in a black velvet sky. Down below, the camp of Midian is a sprawling galaxy of its own, a city of 135,000 men, their campfires twinkling like a fallen constellation. The sound that drifts up from that valley is the sound of a living entity, the murmur of thousands of conversations in harsh, guttural tongues, the restless stirring and grunting of countless camels, the distant bleating of stolen sheep, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer on an anvil, even at this late hour. It is the sound of an occupying force, confident, complacent, and utterly dominant. They have no fear of attack. Who would dare? And here you are, on the slopes of Mount Gilboa, one of 300. The 31,700 men who stood with you just hours ago are gone. Their absence is a palpable void, a silence that screams louder than any war cry. The air feels colder, thinner. You look at the men around you. You don't know all their names. You know one thing about them. They drink water like a dog, with their eyes open. They are the vigilant, the watchful, the ones who did not kneel. But right now, that seems like a bizarre and flimsy qualification for the task ahead. You look from their faces, illuminated by the faint starlight, down to the impossible sea of your enemy, and the cold knot of fear that lives in the pit of every man's stomach begins to tighten. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the will to act in spite of it. But that will is a finite resource, and it is draining away with every passing moment. Gideon feels it too. The divine anointing, the fleece, the public victory over Baal, these things are real. But so is the overwhelming sensory data of the enemy's power. He is still a man, and the weight of 300 lives, the fate of his entire nation, rests on his shoulders. God, in his intimate understanding of the human heart, knows that the leader of this impossible mission needs one final infusion of courage. He needs to move from a faith based on signs and promises to a faith based on the enemy's own terrified confession. So in the dead of night, God speaks to Gideon again. His voice is not a thunderous command, but a quiet, compassionate invitation. Arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. It is a statement of accomplished fact. The victory is already won in the divine realm. Gideon just needs to walk it out in the physical. But God knows the gap between those two realities can be a terrifying chasm. He anticipates Gideon's fear. But if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah your servant. This is a profound act of grace. God doesn't condemn Gideon's fear. He makes provision for it. He gives him a companion, a witness. He doesn't demand a leap of faith into the dark. He provides a small lamp for the next few steps. The instruction is twofold. It is a reconnaissance mission, but more than that, it is a divine therapy session for a terrified commander. Gideon chooses the latter option. He takes Purah, whose name means bough or branch, a fitting name for a man who will offer support. The two of them slip away from their small, silent camp. Every step is taken with infinite care. A dislodged pebble could tumble down the hillside and betray their presence. A snapped twig could echo in the still night air. They move like ghosts, using the deep shadows cast by boulders and ancient olive trees as cover. As they get closer, the smells of the Midianite camp intensify. The pungent, oily scent of thousands of camels, the wood smoke clinging to the damp night air, the smell of cooking meat, of unwashed bodies, of leather and dust. The low hum of the camp resolves into individual sounds. Men coughing in their sleep, the soft jingle of a horse's harness, a whispered conversation near an outpost. They reach the perimeter of the camp. It's not a fortified wall, but a sprawling, chaotic mess of tents, animal pens, and baggage carts. Security is lax. Why would it be otherwise? They are an occupying army in a conquered land. Their sentries are posted, but they are bored, inattentive. They stand leaning on their spears, looking out into a darkness from which they expect no threat. Gideon and Purah creep past the outer ring of sentries, melting into the shadows between the black goat hair tents. They are now inside the belly of the beast. The sheer scale of it is suffocating. Tents stretch in every direction, a labyrinth of canvas and rope. They are surrounded by sleeping warriors, any one of whom could awaken and raise the alarm. The risk is immense. Their hearts must be hammering against their ribs. They move deeper towards the center of the camp, where the command tents would likely be. And there, in the flickering light of a dying campfire, they see two men talking. They are not generals discussing strategy. They are common soldiers, perhaps unable to sleep, sharing their anxieties in hushed tones. Gideon and Purah press themselves against the side of a tent, holding their breath, listening. One man is speaking, recounting a dream that has clearly disturbed him. "Behold," he says to his friend, "I dreamed a dream, and behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian, and came to the tent, and struck it so that it fell and turned it upside down, and the tent lay flat." It's a strange, almost absurd dream. Not a vision of armies and clashing swords, but of a picnic lunch gone rogue. But his companion immediately understands its significance. His interpretation comes in a rushed, terrified whisper. This is no other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp. Let's stop and unpack the power of this moment. For Gideon, hiding in the darkness just a few feet away, these words are a divine thunderclap. He has just heard the enemy pronounce his own victory. He has heard his own name spoken with terror from the mouth of a Midianite soldier. This is intelligence of the highest order, but it's not about troop movements or weaknesses in their defenses. It is a report on the enemy's morale. They are not as confident as they appear. The undercurrent of their bravado is a deep-seated dread. God has been at work not only in the camp of Israel, but also in the hearts of their oppressors, planting seeds of fear and insecurity through troubling dreams. And the symbolism of the dream itself is devastatingly precise. A cake of barley bread. Barley was the poor man's grain, the food of the impoverished, the fodder for livestock. It was a common, coarse, and cheap staple. In contrast, the Midianites were wealthy, consuming the choice wheat of the valley. The barley loaf is a perfect symbol for Israel in its current state, impoverished, humble, despised. It represents Gideon himself, the man from the weakest clan, thrashing in a winepress. And the tent. The tent is a symbol of the entire Midianite confederacy. Their nomadic life was defined by their tents. Their camp was a city of tents. A tent, for all its size, is a fundamentally unstable structure. It has no foundation. Its stability depends entirely on pegs and ropes. The dream, then, is a vision of the despised and insignificant, barley loaf, completely demolishing the seemingly powerful but ultimately fragile structure of the enemy, the tent. The loaf doesn't just knock it over, it strikes it, turns it upside down, and leaves it utterly flat. It is a vision of total, shocking, and humiliating defeat brought about by the most unlikely of agents. For Gideon, hearing this interpretation from an enemy soldier is the final, irrefutable confirmation he needs. It is God telling him, "This is how your enemy sees you." They don't see a farmer with 300 men. They see a supernatural weapon, an instrument of divine judgment. The fear that drove him down the mountain evaporates, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated faith. His response is instantaneous and instinctive. In the heart of the enemy camp, surrounded by tens of thousands of sleeping soldiers, Gideon does not draw a sword. He bows his head and worships. It is an act of breathtaking audacity and profound faith. He is no longer just a general, he is a priest, offering thanks in the most unholy of places. The enemy camp becomes his sanctuary. This is the turning point for Gideon the man. He has moved beyond needing signs. He has heard the voice of God through the mouth of his enemy. And now he is ready. He and Purah slip back out of the camp, their return journey fueled by a new divine energy. When Gideon arrives back at the small encampment of the 300, he is a changed man. The hesitant, questioning leader is gone. In his place is a commander filled with the certainty of victory. His voice rings with an authority that leaves no room for doubt. "Arise," he commands his men, his voice a sharp whisper in the night. "For the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand." And now he reveals his battle plan. It is a plan so strange, so counterintuitive, that it could only have been born of divine inspiration. He is not going to arm his men with swords and spears for a direct assault. The time for conventional weapons will come later, in the pursuit. For the initial strike, the weapon is the mind of the enemy. The strategy is psychological warfare, an orchestra of terror designed to make the Midianite army destroy itself. He divides his 300 men into 3 companies of 100. This is a sound military tactic, allowing them to approach the vast enemy camp from multiple directions, creating the illusion of a much larger encircling force. Then he distributes the equipment, and the men must have been utterly bewildered. To each man, he gives not a sword, but a shofar, not a shield, but an empty clay jar, and not a spear, but a torch to be concealed inside the jar. This is the arsenal of the apocalypse. Let's look at each element. First, the shofar, the ram's horn. To the modern ear, it's a primitive trumpet. But to an ancient Israelite, it was a sound loaded with immense theological and historical weight. This was the sound that thundered from Mount Sinai when God descended in fire and smoke to give the law. It was the sound that, for 6 days, accompanied the Ark of the Covenant as it circled the city of Jericho. And on the 7th day, it was the long, unified blast of the shofars that preceded the collapse of the city walls. It was the sound used to announce the coronation of a king, to signal the beginning of the Jubilee year of liberation, and to call the people to solemn assembly. It was, in short, the sound of God's direct, terrifying, and powerful intervention in human affairs. Giving 300 men a shofar was not just giving them a noisemaker. It was arming them with a symbol of divine authority and a weapon of spiritual warfare. The blast of a single shofar was a call to attention. The simultaneous blast of 300 from 3 different directions in the dead of night would sound like the heavens themselves were tearing apart. It would be the sound of judgment. Second, the empty clay jar or pitcher. This is the most mundane of the 3 items. It's a common, everyday piece of pottery used for carrying water. It is cheap, fragile, and utterly unremarkable. And that is its genius. Its primary purpose is concealment. Inside each jar, a torch is placed. This hides the light, allowing the 3 companies to approach the camp in total darkness. But its secondary purpose is auditory. When these 300 jars are smashed simultaneously, the sound will not be a gentle tinkling. It will be a sharp, violent, shattering crash. In the disoriented mind of a man ripped from a deep sleep, that sudden, percussive sound, multiplied by 300, would be easily mistaken for the crash of swords against shields, the splintering of spears, the sounds of a full-scale infantry charge breaking into the camp. The jar, a symbol of human weakness and fragility, as the Apostle Paul would later write. We have this treasure in earthen vessels, becomes, in its destruction, a tool of terrifying deception. Third, the torch. A simple torch made of reeds or wood, likely soaked in oil or pitch. Hidden inside the jar, its light is invisible. But when the jars are smashed, 300 points of light will suddenly flare into existence, surrounding the camp. To the panicked Midianites, waking up in utter darkness to a deafening trumpet blast, they will not see 300 men with torches. They will see the leading edge of a vast army, the torchbearers for thousands upon thousands of soldiers pouring down the hillsides from every direction. The sudden appearance of a ring of fire would create an overwhelming sense of being hopelessly surrounded and trapped. It is a weapon of disorientation, of psychological envelopment. Light versus darkness. God's invading fire against the comfortable gloom of the oppressor. The shofar for the ears, the torch for the eyes, the smashing jar for the nerves. It is a multisensory assault. The goal is not to kill the Midianites, but to induce a state of absolute panic and paranoia. A collective hysteria so powerful that their cohesion as an army dissolves into a mad scramble for individual survival. The true weapon is fear. Gideon lays out the plan with simple, clear instructions. The 3 companies will take up their positions on the hillsides surrounding the valley, on the west, the east, and the south, leaving the path back towards the Jordan River to the north as the only apparent escape route. They are to wait in absolute silence. The timing must be perfect. He will give the signal. "Watch me," he tells them, "and do as I do. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I and all who are with me blow the shofar, then you also blow the shofars on every side of the camp and shout, 'For the Lord, and for Gideon. The Hebrew here is even more concise and powerful. La Yahweh Yul Gideon. It's not just a shout, it's a battle cry that cleverly links God's power with Gideon's leadership. It gives the panicked enemy a name to attach to their terror. It is the name they already fear, the name from the dream. The 300 men, now understanding the brilliant madness of the plan, move out. They slip away into the darkness, their clay jars held carefully, the precious torches smoldering within, the shofars slung over their shoulders. They creep into their designated positions, forming a vast, invisible arc around the sleeping enemy. Every man finds his spot, crouches down, and waits. The silence that descends is heavy with anticipation. This is the hardest part of any military operation, the waiting. The minutes stretch into an eternity. Down below, the camp begins to stir. The middle watch is about to begin, around 10 p.m. The sentries are being changed. This is the moment of maximum vulnerability, when the old guards are tired and thinking of sleep, and the new guards are still rubbing the sleep from their eyes, their senses not yet fully attuned to the night. This is the moment Gideon has been waiting for. He is with his own company of 100, likely on the western side of the camp, the most prominent position. He raises the ram's horn to his lips. He holds the clay jar in his other hand. He takes a final, steadying breath. He looks out over his men, a scattered line of shadows in the dark, and then down at the unsuspecting city of tents. This is it, the culmination of 7 years of suffering, of one man's journey from a winepress to a mountaintop, of a nation's desperate cry for deliverance. Then he acts. He shatters the night with the raw, terrifying blast of his shofar. In the same instant, he smashes his clay jar on a rock. The crash echoes, and the hidden torch flares to life, a sudden star in the darkness. He raises the torch high and bellows the battle cry into the night. La Yahweh Yul Gideon. And all around the valley, from 2 other directions, the signal is answered. 200 more shofars join his, a cacophony of divine judgment that seems to rip the sky in two. 200 more jars shatter, a wave of percussive violence that rolls down the hills. 200 more torches blaze into view, completing the ring of fire. And 200 more voices join the cry, for the Lord and for Gideon, the sound echoing and re-echoing off the hills until it sounds like the roar of a legion. Down in the valley, the effect is instantaneous and catastrophic. A Midianite soldier, jolted from a deep sleep, sits bolt upright. His mind, thick with sleep, struggles to process the sensory assault. He hears a sound he cannot comprehend, a terrifying, supernatural blast from all directions. He hears the crash of battle, the splintering of shields and spears. He opens the flap of his tent and sees the hillsides, which were pitch black moments before, now alive with a swarm of dancing lights, a circle of fire that has them completely trapped. He hears the name that has been haunting his dreams, Gideon. Panic is a virus, and it spreads through the camp faster than fire through dry grass. Men stumble out of their tents, grabbing for their swords, their eyes wide with terror. But in the pitch darkness of the valley floor, illuminated only by the distant, menacing torches, they cannot see the enemy. All they see are shadows, moving figures, the glint of steel from their own comrades. The man next to them might be an Israelite who has already breached the camp. The figure running towards them might be the advance guard of the main assault. There is no commander to give orders, no cohesion, no way to distinguish friend from foe. The only instinct left is survival. And so, they do the only thing they can. They lash out at the nearest threat. The Bible describes it with chilling simplicity. And the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the camp. The psychological attack has worked to perfection. The Midianite army implodes. The valley floor, which a moment before was a sleeping camp, erupts into a charnel house of chaos and fratricidal slaughter. Men scream and fight and die at the hands of their own brothers and allies. The unity of the great Eastern Confederacy dissolves into 1,000 individual, terrified skirmishes. The barley loaf has struck the tent, and the tent is collapsing on itself. The fight is short and brutal. Those who are not cut down by friendly fire realize their only hope is to flee. A massive, terrified rout begins. They run, not as an army in retreat, but as a stampeding herd, trampling one another in their desperation to escape the unseen, unheard enemy. They pour northwards, towards the only dark corridor left open to them, the path that leads to the fords of the Jordan River. Their only thought is to get back to the safety of the eastern desert. Up on the hillside, Gideon and his 300 men stand and watch. They do not charge down. They do not engage in hand-to-hand combat. Their work, for now, is done. They simply hold their positions, keep their torches held high, and continue to blow their shofars, maintaining the pressure, fueling the panic, a terrifying ring of light and sound presiding over the self-destruction of their enemy. The impossible has happened. A small band of men armed with musical instruments and pottery has routed one of the largest armies of their time without suffering a single casualty. The first and most critical phase of the victory is complete. But the night is still young, and the fleeing enemy is a wounded, dangerous beast. The pursuit is about to begin. The echoes of 300 shofars fade into the pandemonium of a dying army. From your vantage point on the hillside, holding your torch aloft, the scene below is a vision of hell. The valley of Jezreel has become a vast, dark canvas slashed with the frantic, fleeting brushstrokes of men in their death throes. The screams are no longer the coherent shouts of soldiers, but the high, thin shrieks of pure terror and agony. The Midianite army, a force that had seemed as permanent and immovable as a mountain range, is now a liquid, a chaotic flood of humanity pouring northwards, away from the terrifying ring of light and sound. They are not retreating, they are hemorrhaging, a panicked, headless stampede. For a moment, there is a sense of profound, unbelievable triumph. The miracle has happened. The impossible has been achieved. You look at the man next to you, his face lit by the flickering torchlight, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and shock. You have won, but victory is not an event. It is a process. And the most dangerous part of that process is about to begin. The initial psychological shock has broken the enemy's will to fight, but it has not eliminated their ability to flee, regroup, and return. 135,000 men, even in a state of panic, are a formidable force. The initial number killed in the camp by friendly fire is significant, perhaps 10 or 20,000, but the vast majority are now escaping. A wounded beast is at its most unpredictable. If these veteran warriors reach the fords of the Jordan River and escape back into the eastern deserts, they will live to fight another day. They will nurse their wounds. Their terror will fade into a thirst for revenge. And in a year or 2 or 5, the locusts will return. This victory cannot be a temporary reprieve. It must be an annihilation. The threat must be excised, root and stem. Gideon understands this. The man of God, the orchestrator of the miracle, now has to become the relentless hunter. The time for trumpets and torches is over. The time for the sword has come. He cannot pursue this vast, scattering army with just his 300 men. They were the scalpel for the initial, precise incision. Now, he needs a sledgehammer for the bloody work of the chase. And so, the call goes out again. Messengers, likely from the ranks of the 9,700 who were sent home, are dispatched once more. They don't run south this time, but north, fanning out into the rugged tribal lands that lie between the valley of Jezreel and the Jordan River. They run through the hills of Naphtali, Asher, and all of Manasseh, the very tribes that had first answered the call. The message is simple. The enemy is broken. They are running. Come now and finish the task. The men who had been dismissed in confusion and shame now have their chance at redemption. They can participate in the victory after all. They grab their weapons and pour down from their villages and strongholds, no longer a hesitant, fearful assembly, but a mobilized, vengeful host, converging on the fleeing Midianites. But Gideon has a more specific, strategic command for another tribe, a tribe that had, until now, been conspicuously absent from the conflict, the great and powerful tribe of Ephraim. He sends messengers south into the hill country of Ephraim with a critical mission. Come down against the Midianites and capture the waters against them as far as Bethbara and also the Jordan. This is not a general call to join the chase. It is a specific tactical order. Ephraim's territory was strategically located. They controlled the central highlands and the approaches to the main fords of the Jordan River. Gideon's plan is a classic pincer movement. While he and the northern tribes harry the fleeing Midianites from the rear, pushing them ever northward, the men of Ephraim are to race ahead and seize the river crossings, cutting off the escape route. They are to be the anvil to Gideon's hammer. The men of Ephraim respond. They are a proud and martial tribe, descended from Joseph, and they would not have taken kindly to being left out of the initial glory. Now, given a vital and high-stakes role, they mobilize with speed and efficiency. They They surge down from their hills and seize control of the riverbanks, setting up an ambush for the exhausted, terrified Midianites who are desperately trying to cross to safety. The trap works perfectly. The Midianite fugitives, having been hounded for miles, finally see the river, the symbol of their escape, only to find it blocked by a fresh, disciplined, and merciless army. What follows is not a battle, but a slaughter. The Ephraimites cut them down by the thousands at the river's edge. In the midst of this chaotic victory, the men of Ephraim achieve a major strategic objective. They capture 2 of the Midianite princes, or chieftains. Their names are Oreb and Zeb. These are not just random commanders. Their names carry a savage symbolism. Oreb means raven, and Zeb means wolf. These are predators, birds, and beasts of prey. A fitting description for the leaders of a people who had preyed upon Israel for 7 long years. The Ephraimites show them no mercy. They execute Oreb at a place that would forever after be known as the Rock of Oreb. And they kill Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. They take the severed heads of the 2 princes as trophies, proof of their martial prowess and their vital contribution to the victory. The main body of the Midianite army, including its 2 supreme kings, Zebah and Zalmunna, have managed to cross the Jordan further north before Ephraim could secure all the fords. Gideon, with his weary band of 300, crosses the river in hot pursuit. And it is here, on the east bank of the Jordan, that the celebration of victory is cut short by the bitter poison of human pride and jealousy. The men of Ephraim, flush with their success, and holding the grisly trophies of the 2 dead princes, seek out Gideon. But they do not come to offer congratulations. They come with a grievance. Imagine the scene. Gideon and his 300 men are bone-weary. They have been awake for more than 24 hours. They have conducted a high-stress infiltration, orchestrated a terrifying psychological attack, and are now in the midst of a grueling, long-distance pursuit. They are running on nothing but adrenaline and the will to see the mission through. And at this moment, they are confronted by the fresh-faced, belligerent leaders of Ephraim. The text says they accosted him fiercely. This is a hostile confrontation. Their complaint is dripping with wounded pride. What is this thing you have done to us? Not to call us when you went to fight against Midian. This is a moment of extreme danger. The external enemy is still on the run, but a far more perilous internal enemy has just emerged: intertribal rivalry. Ephraim feels slighted, disrespected. They see themselves as the natural leaders of the northern tribes, and this upstart from the backwater clan of Abiezer has won a historic victory without even consulting them. In their eyes, he has stolen their glory. They are not celebrating Israel's deliverance. They are complaining about their own lack of prominence in the story. Their pride is so great that they are willing to risk a civil war in the middle of a campaign, to turn their swords from the Midianites to their own Israelite brothers. The entire victory, the entire future of the nation, hangs in the balance, threatened by the fragile egos of a few powerful men. This is a test of leadership for Gideon, and it is a different kind of test than the ones involving fleeces or drinking water. This is a test of diplomacy, of humility, of wisdom. The old Gideon, the angry and cynical man in the winepress, might have lashed out. The new Gideon, the commander filled with the Spirit of the Lord, responds with breathtaking political genius. He doesn't defend himself. He doesn't point out that they hadn't lifted a finger to help for 7 years. He doesn't lecture them on God's sovereign choice of a leader. Instead, he diffuses their anger by inflating their importance. He looks at them, these proud, angry men, and he says, "What have I done now in comparison with you?" He immediately minimizes his own role, his own incredible achievement. He then delivers a line that will become a proverbial saying in Israel, a masterpiece of flattery and conciliation. Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? A vintage is the whole harvest, the main crop. Gleaning is what the poor were allowed to do after the harvest was over, picking up the few leftover, missed grapes. Gideon is saying that Ephraim's leftovers, their mop-up operation, is of more value and significance than his entire main campaign. It is a statement of such profound and calculated humility that it completely disarms them. He is essentially telling them, "My great victory is nothing compared to your small one." And he doesn't stop there. He drives the point home by giving them full credit for their tactical success. God has given into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb, and Zeb. What have I been able to do in comparison with you? He points to their trophies, the severed heads, and declares them to be the supreme achievement of the war. He makes them the heroes of the story. The effect is immediate. Then their anger against him subsided when he said this. Their wounded pride is soothed. Their need for recognition is satisfied. They have been honored, and that is all they really wanted. Gideon, with a few soft words, has averted a civil war and kept the coalition together. He has proven that sometimes the wisest thing a leader can do is step out of the spotlight and let others claim the glory. But there is no rest. The crisis is averted, but the kings are still at large. Zebah and Zalmunna, whose names mean something like sacrifice and protection denied, are the ultimate prize. They are the heart of the Midianite leadership. As long as they remain free, the war is not over. And so Gideon turns from the placated Ephraimites and continues the pursuit into the desert wilderness east of the Jordan. The text gives us a simple, yet incredibly evocative description of his and his men's condition. Faint, yet pursuing. These 3 words capture the essence of this stage of the campaign. The initial euphoria of the miraculous victory is long gone. The adrenaline has worn off. Now, all that is left is the grim, grinding reality of the chase. They are deep in hostile territory. The sun is relentless, beating down on the arid landscape. Their water skins are likely empty. They have not eaten a proper meal in days. Their muscles are screaming with fatigue. Their feet are bruised and bloodied. Their throats are thick with dust. They are faint. They are at the absolute limit of human endurance. And yet, they are pursuing. Their will has transcended their physical weakness. Their commitment to finishing the job, to ensuring that this plague will never return, drives them onward, step after agonizing step. This is no longer a story about miracles. It is a story about the gritty, painful, unglamorous work of perseverance. It is the story of what happens after the shouting is over. In their desperate state, they approach an Israelite settlement on the east side of the Jordan, a town named Sukkot, located in the territory of Gad. These are their countrymen. Gideon approaches the leaders of the town with a simple, reasonable request. Please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are faint, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. He explains the situation clearly. His men are at the point of collapse, and they need basic provisions to continue their mission. A mission that is for the benefit of all Israel, including the people of Sukkot. The response he receives is not one of patriotic support, but of cynical, cowardly self-preservation. The officials of Sukkot look at Gideon and his 300 exhausted men, and they look at the 15,000 Midianite soldiers who remain with their kings, and they make a cold calculation. Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna already in your hand? They sneer. That we should give bread to your army. Their meaning is clear. You haven't won yet. You are a tiny, exhausted force chasing a much larger one. The odds are still with the Midianite kings. If we help you and you fail, they will come back and punish us for aiding you. So no, we will not help you. We are hedging our bets. It is a stunning betrayal, a rejection born of fear, and a complete lack of faith. They see Gideon not as a divine deliverer, but as a risky investment. In this moment, something inside Gideon snaps. The patient diplomat who soothed the pride of Ephraim is gone, consumed by exhaustion, righteous anger, and the bitter sting of betrayal. He is no longer fighting just a foreign enemy. He is now fighting the cowardice and faithlessness of his own people. His response is not one of persuasion, but of raw, terrifying fury. He looks the leaders of Sukkot in the eye and pronounces a chillingly specific sentence upon them. Therefore, he says, his voice low and menacing, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will thresh your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. It is a promise of horrific torture. He is not just threatening to kill them, he is threatening to flay them alive, to teach them a lesson they will never forget, using the very thorns that grow in the unforgiving desert around them. He is invoking a brutal agricultural metaphor, just as a thrashing sledge with its sharp teeth beats the grain from the husk. So he will beat the skin from their bodies. The man of peace, Yahweh Shalom, has become a man of terrifying vengeance. Shunned and starving, Gideon and his men press on. They travel a few miles further and come to another Israelite town, Penuel, which means face of God, the place where their ancestor Jacob wrestled with the angel. He makes the same request, and he receives the same insulting refusal. The people of Penuel are just as cowardly and pragmatic as those of Sukkot. They too refuse to risk the wrath of Midian by helping Gideon, and to them, Gideon delivers a similar promise of retribution, this one aimed at their civic pride. When I come again in peace, he vows, I will break down this tower. The tower was the town's primary fortification, its symbol of strength and security. Gideon is promising to shatter the very thing in which they place their trust, since they refuse to place their trust in God's deliverer. Fueled now by a black rage, Gideon and his 300 men push on, deeper into the desert, following the caravan route. They are beyond faint now, animated only by sheer will and the promise of vengeance, both on their foreign enemies and their treacherous kinsmen. They finally track the remnant of the Midianite army to a place called Karkar. The Midianites have made a fatal mistake. They believe they have escaped. They are deep in what they consider to be safe territory, far from Israelite lands. Their discipline has collapsed. The text says the camp was at ease or secure. They have stopped running, stopped looking over their shoulders. They have let down their guard. And Gideon, the master of the surprise attack, strikes again. He and his 300 men, appearing as if from nowhere, fall upon the unsuspecting and complacent camp. The 15,000 remaining Midianite soldiers, caught completely off guard, are routed. The battle is a decisive victory, and in the chaos, Gideon achieves his ultimate objective. He captures the two kings, Zebah and Zalmunna, alive. Now the long journey back begins. But it is not a triumphant march home. It is a journey of retribution. Gideon first returns to Sukkot with the captured kings in tow, a living testament to the victory the town's elders had deemed impossible. He is now the undisputed victor, and there is no one to stay his hand. He finds a young man from the town and forces him to write down the names of the officials and elders of Sukkot, 77 men. He then carries out his horrific promise. He takes the elders of the town, and he takes the thorns of the wilderness and the briars, and with them he taught the men of Sukkot. The text is terse, but the implication is one of unimaginable cruelty. He makes an example of them, a brutal lesson in the price of faithlessness. From Sukkot, he goes to Penuel. He fulfills his second vow, tearing down their proud tower. And he doesn't stop there. He kills the men of the town. The liberator of Israel has become the butcher of Israelites. The war has corrupted him, turned his righteous zeal into a capacity for merciless brutality. The line between justice and vengeance has been irrevocably blurred. Finally, he turns to the two captive kings, the architects of his people's misery. He brings Zebah and Zalmunna before him. The war is over. The nation is saved. But there is one last piece of business, and his first question to them reveals that this entire epic struggle has been driven by something deeply personal, a hidden motive that has fueled his relentless pursuit. He doesn't ask them about their strategy, their gods, or their kingdom. He asks them, "What kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor?" Mount Tabor was a prominent mountain on the edge of the Jezreel Valley. His question implies a specific event, a massacre that has not been mentioned in the story until this very moment. The kings, perhaps hoping for mercy by being forthright, answer him honestly. "As you are, so were they," they say. Every one of them resembled the son of a king. They are saying the men they killed were noble, princely, just like Gideon. And with that answer, the final piece of the puzzle clicks into place. A cold fury settles over Gideon. "They were my brothers," he says, "the sons of my own mother. As the Lord lives, if you had saved them alive, I would not kill you." This entire war, this divine commission, has been intertwined with a personal blood feud. The Midianite oppression was not just a national crisis for Gideon, it was a family tragedy. The locusts had not just stolen his grain, they had stolen his brothers' lives. This explains his relentless, almost obsessive pursuit. This explains the depths of his rage. He has not just been liberating a nation, he has been avenging his own blood. He turns to his firstborn son, Jether, who is just a youth. "Rise and kill them," Gideon commands. In the ancient world, this was a way to transfer the honor of the victory to his heir, to blood the young man and initiate him into the world of warriors. But Jether is just a boy. He looks at these two formidable desert kings, even in their bound and defeated state, and he is afraid. He does not draw his sword. Zebah and Zalmunna, warrior kings to the very end, see the boy's hesitation. They do not want the indignity of being executed by a child. They look at Gideon and make one final, proud request. "Rise yourself and fall upon us," they say, "for as the man is, so is his strength." It is a warrior's plea for a warrior's death. Let me be killed by a man of strength and honor, not fumbled at by a frightened boy. Gideon grants their request. He rises, draws his own sword, and executes Zebah and Zalmunna. With his own hand, he ends the lives of the men who killed his brothers. The war is officially over. The Midianite threat is extinguished. Israel is free. But as Gideon stands over the bodies of the two kings, the liberator stands transformed. He is no longer the fearful farmer from the winepress, nor the humble diplomat who placated Ephraim. He is a hardened, ruthless warlord, a man who has tortured and killed his own countrymen, a man who has satisfied a personal vendetta under the banner of a holy war. The victory is complete, but it has come at a terrible cost, not just to the enemy, but to the soul of the victor himself. The dust of the pursuit has not yet settled, and the blood on Gideon's sword is still drying. But the news of his victory travels faster than any messenger. It sweeps through the hill country of Ephraim, across the northern tribal lands of Asher and Naphtali, and down into the heartlands of Manasseh. It is a wildfire of hope. For the first time in 7 excruciating years, the long nightmare is over. The locusts have been exterminated. The shadow of Midian has been lifted from the land. There is a collective exhale, a release of tension that has been held in the national psyche for nearly a decade. People emerge from their caves and strongholds, blinking in the sunlight of a new and unfamiliar freedom. And their eyes, filled with a gratitude so profound it borders on worship, all turn to one man. Gideon, son of Joash, Jerubbaal, the destroyer of Baal, the vanquisher of Midian, the liberator of Israel. He is no longer just a man. He is a symbol, a living legend. The story of the 300 of the trumpets and the torches is already being told and retold around every village fire, growing grander with each telling. He is the man God chose, the man God empowered. And in the minds of the people, a logical, pragmatic, and deeply dangerous idea begins to form. They have seen the chaos that ensues when every man does what is right in his own eyes. They have lived through the weakness of a loose tribal confederacy, unable to mount a unified defense against a determined foe. They have been a nation of sheep without a shepherd, scattered and devoured by wolves. Now they have found their shepherd. They have found their strong man. They crave stability. They crave security. They crave a focal point for their national identity. And so they come to him. The elders, the men of Israel, their faces weathered by hardship, but now shining with admiration, approach Gideon. They bring with them a proposal, an offer that represents a monumental shift in the political and theological landscape of Israel. Rule over us, they say, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. This is not a request for him to continue as a temporary, charismatic judge. This is an offer of a crown. They are asking him to establish a hereditary monarchy, a dynasty, the Gideonite dynasty. They are asking him to become King Gideon the First. It is the ultimate reward, the pinnacle of human achievement. To be the founder of a royal line, to have your name etched into history as the father of a nation's kings. It is an offer of power, of prestige, of permanence. And from a purely human perspective, it makes perfect sense. He has proven himself to be a brilliant military strategist, a decisive leader, and a man capable of uniting at least some of the tribes. Why not formalize his authority? Why not build a lasting political structure on the foundation of his incredible victory? Gideon stands at a precipice. The temptation must have been immense. To accept would be to secure his family's future for generations. It would be to accept the adoration of his people and translate it into tangible, institutional power. He could reason that it was for the nation's own good to provide the central leadership they so clearly lacked. He could create a standing army, build fortifications, establish a system of taxation and justice. He could make Israel strong, a nation to be reckoned with, no longer a vulnerable collection of squabbling clans. The offer is not just a temptation of pride. It is a temptation of pragmatism. And in this crucial moment, Gideon gives the perfect answer. He gives the answer that is theologically flawless, the answer that cuts to the very heart of what it means to be Israel. He looks at the elders, at the hopeful faces of the nation he has just saved, and he says, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. It is one of the most profound statements in the entire book of Judges. With this single sentence, Gideon rejects the allure of human kingship and affirms the foundational principle of Israel's existence. They are a theocracy. Their king is not a man who sits on a throne of wood and gold, but the God who sits on a throne in the heavens. Yahweh is their king. This was the covenant established at Sinai. God was their sovereign, their lawgiver, their commander-in-chief. Set up a human king would be an act of spiritual treason, a rejection of God's direct rule in favor of a pale human imitation. It would be a vote of no confidence in their divine monarch. Gideon, it seems, understands this perfectly. His response is a verbal embodiment of the very lesson his victory was supposed to teach, that Israel's salvation comes not from the strength of men or the wisdom of their leaders, but from the hand of God alone. He passes the test. He deflects the glory. He points the people back to their true and only King. It is his finest hour, the spiritual climax of his entire story. But the human heart is a place of contradiction, a landscape of sunlit peaks and shadowy valleys. And no sooner has Gideon reached this spiritual summit than he immediately begins his descent into a deep and treacherous ravine. The story pivots on a single, fateful word, and he gives the perfect theological answer, reaffirming God's sovereignty. And then, in the very next breath, he makes a request that will completely undermine everything he has just said. And Gideon said to them, "Let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earrings from his spoil." It seems like a simple enough request, a souvenir, a token of appreciation for their commander. The soldiers are happy to oblige. They have just won an immense amount of plunder. The Ishmaelites, a term used here interchangeably with Midianites, were known for wearing gold, particularly golden crescent ornaments and earrings. The text says, "They willingly gave them. They spread out a cloak on the ground, and man after man walks by, unhooking the golden earrings from their own ears or from the bags of plunder they carry, and tossing them onto the growing pile." It is a spontaneous, joyful offering to their hero. The camera lingers on this pile of gold. The light catches the crescent shapes, the intricate metalwork. The heap grows larger and larger. A weighmaster is called. The gold is gathered and placed on the scales. The final tally is announced, 1,700 shekels of gold. A shekel was about 11.5 grams. This means Gideon has just collected nearly 20 kilograms, or about 43 pounds, of pure gold. This is an immense fortune, a king's ransom. And this doesn't even include the other plunder he takes for himself. The crescent ornaments, and the pendants, and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and the collars that were on the necks of their camels. He has just amassed a treasure worthy of royalty. The man who refused the title of king has eagerly accepted the wealth of a king. This is the first crack in the facade, the first sign that his heart is not as pure as his words. But it is what he does with this gold that transforms a moment of questionable judgment into a catastrophic spiritual disaster. And Gideon made an ephod of it and put it in his city, in Ophrah. To understand the magnitude of this error, we must understand what an ephod was. In the Old Testament, the ephod was a sacred, sleeveless vestment worn by the high priest of Israel as part of his official regalia for ministering in the tabernacle. It was an object of profound religious significance. Woven with gold, blue, purple, and scarlet threads, it was the garment upon which the breastplate, with its 12 precious stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel, was fastened. Most importantly, the ephod was associated with the Urim and Thummim, two objects kept in a pouch in the breastplate that were used to discern the will of God. When King David needed to know if he should pursue the Amalekites, he commanded the priest, "Bring the ephod here to me." The ephod was, therefore, an official, divinely sanctioned tool for seeking divine guidance, and its use was restricted to the Levitical priesthood at the central sanctuary, which at that time was located at Shiloh. Gideon is not a priest. He is from the tribe of Manasseh, not Levi. His hometown of Ophrah is not the designated place of worship for all Israel. By creating his own ephod, he is committing a litany of spiritual crimes. He is usurping the role of the priesthood. He is creating a schismatic religious object, a rival to the one in the official sanctuary at Shiloh. He is, in effect, privatizing access to God. He is establishing his own town as a new religious center, a place of pilgrimage. He, Gideon, will be the gatekeeper. What could possibly have motivated him to do this? Perhaps his intentions at the outset were not entirely corrupt. He had experienced God in a powerful and direct way. The angel of the Lord had appeared to him at Ophrah. He had built an altar there, Yahweh Shalom. Perhaps he wanted to commemorate this special revelation, to create a permanent memorial to the great victory God had given him. Perhaps he wanted to have his own means of seeking God's guidance, bypassing the formal and perhaps distant priesthood at Shiloh. He might have seen it as an act of piety, a way of honoring God with the very best of the spoils of war. Good intentions, however, are no defense against the consequences of disobeying God's explicit commands about worship. He was creating a form of worship that was centered on a man, a place, and an object of his own making, rather than on God's prescribed pattern. And the object itself must have been magnificent. 43 pounds of gold fashioned into a single priestly garment. It would not have been merely a cloth vestment with gold thread. It was likely a solid gold object, or at least heavily plated, a sculpture in the shape of an ephod. It would have been a stunning work of art, gleaming, beautiful, and incredibly impressive. He places it in Ophrah, his city. It becomes the town's main attraction, its claim to fame. It becomes Gideon's ephod. The consequences are swift and devastating. The text uses the strongest possible language to describe what happened next. And all Israel whored after it there. The Hebrew word for whored, zana, is the primary biblical metaphor for idolatry. It denotes spiritual adultery, a faithless betrayal of the covenant relationship with Yahweh. The people of Israel, who had just been delivered from the consequences of their Baal worship, now flock to Ophrah and commit the same essential sin. But this time it is disguised in the language and symbols of Yahweh worship. This is, in many ways, a more insidious form of idolatry. It's not the worship of a foreign god, but the worship of a corrupted version of their own faith. They come to see the ephod. They come to honor Gideon, the great deliverer. They likely bring offerings, ask for guidance, and perform religious rituals before this golden object. The ephod itself becomes the object of their devotion, eclipsing the God it was supposedly meant to honor. It becomes a talisman, a source of national pride, a golden calf for a new generation. And the final, tragic verdict is rendered. and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. A snare is a trap. It is something that looks appealing, but leads to capture and death. This beautiful golden monument to victory becomes the instrument of his own spiritual downfall and the ruin of his household. He who had refused the external trappings of a crown had fashioned for himself a spiritual crown, setting himself up as a religious authority, a power broker who controlled a new popular cult. He wanted the power and influence of a king without the title. The ephod gave him that. People would come to offer not just because he was a great general, but because he was the keeper of the sacred object. He had found a way to rule after all. The story then fast forwards, summarizing the next 4 decades. And Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they raised their heads no more. And the land had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. This is the great paradox of his life. On the surface, his reign as judge was a resounding success. He brought a generation of peace and stability. The external enemy was gone. The land was quiet. Israel prospered. Gideon himself lived the life of a de facto monarch. He settled down in his own house, no longer needing to hide in caves. He had many wives, a typical sign of royal status and power in the ancient world, used to forge political alliances and display wealth. From these many wives, he fathered 70 sons, a testament to his vitality and the establishment of a large and powerful clan. He had, in every practical sense, the dynasty the people had offered him. He had refused the name king, but he had embraced the reality of it. This 40-year peace is a gilded peace, a calm surface over a churning, toxic undercurrent. While the fields are safe from Midianite raids, the soul of the nation is being poisoned by the golden ephod in Ophrah. The generation that grows up during this time of rest knows only the stories of the great victory, and they see the tangible proof of it in the gleaming idol in Gideon's city. Their faith is slowly, but surely being transferred from the invisible God who gave the victory to the visible relic that commemorates it. Gideon, the aging patriarch, presides over this slow, steady spiritual decay. The snare that he set has trapped his own children and his entire nation, and in a brief, almost parenthetical note, the text reveals the seed of the coming destruction. He also had a concubine in Shechem, and she bore him a son, and he called his name Abimelech. A concubine was a secondary wife, often of a lower social status, and her children did not have the same inheritance rights as the sons of full wives. This son is an outsider, living in his mother's city of Shechem, a city with a long and fraught history with the Israelites. And the name Gideon gives him is a shocking, hubristic clue to his own hidden heart. Abimelech. In Hebrew, Avimelech. It means my father is king, the man who had so piously declared, I will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you, names his own son, my father is king. This single act exposes the deep contradiction within him. His public words proclaimed Yahweh's sovereignty, but his private ambition, the desire in his own heart, was for the throne. He wanted to be king. The ephod was his crown, the The 70 sons were his royal court, and this one son, Abimelech, was the living embodiment of his secret royal pretensions. He was the king of his own heart, and he passed that poisonous ambition on to his son through the very name he gave him. Finally, the long peace comes to an end. Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age and was buried in the tomb of Joash his father at Ophrah of the Abiezrites. His life ends. The great hero is laid to rest, and the moment he is gone, the spiritual rot he fostered bursts forth like a plague. The restraints are off. As soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals and made Baal-berith their god. It is a stunningly swift and complete apostasy. The nation that had flocked to Gideon's golden ephod, practicing a syncretistic, corrupted form of Yahweh worship, now throws off the pretense entirely. They revert to the full-throated paganism they had practiced before their deliverance. They don't just worship Baal, they make a specific Baal their national deity, Baal-berith, which means Baal of the covenant. They are taking the very concept that defined their relationship with Yahweh, the covenant, and transferring it to a Canaanite storm god. It is the ultimate act of betrayal, and the text provides the heartbreaking reason for this betrayal. And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hand of all their enemies on every side, and they did not show steadfast love to the family of Jerubbaal, that is, Gideon, in return for all the good that he had done to Israel. They forgot. The peace and prosperity Gideon's victory had won them had made them complacent. The ephod had taught them to focus on a physical object rather than a relationship with the living God. And so, when Gideon died, their faith, which had been centered on him and his relic, died with him. They forgot God, and they even forgot their loyalty to the family of the man who had saved them. This ingratitude and apostasy set the stage for the final, bloody chapter of Gideon's legacy, the story of his son, Abimelech. The snare that had trapped Gideon's family is about to spring shut in the most violent way imaginable. Abimelech, the son of the concubine, the boy with the royal name, sees his opportunity. He goes to his mother's family in the Canaanite city of Shechem and plants the seeds of a populist rebellion. He speaks to them in the language of ambition and tribal loyalty. Say, in the ears of all the leaders of Shechem, he conspires, which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal rule over you, or that one man rule over you. Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. He plays on their fears of being ruled by a large, fractious group of Gideon's legitimate heirs, and on their local pride. He is one of them. The leaders of Shechem are persuaded. They give him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal-berith. The revolution is funded by the treasury of an idol. With this money, Abimelech hires worthless and reckless fellows, a gang of mercenaries and thugs, and he marches to his father's house in Ophrah. And there, in the very city where the ephod stood as a monument to God's deliverance, Abimelech commits an act of unimaginable horror. He takes his 70 half-brothers, the sons of Gideon, and he slaughters them, all of them, on a single stone. It is a systematic ritualistic execution, a brutal consolidation of power that echoes the darkest practices of pagan kings. The legacy of the man who said, "My son will not rule over you," is the murder of all his sons but one, precisely so that another son could rule. The snare has done its work. The house of Gideon has been annihilated by its own ambition. Only one son escapes, Jotham, the youngest. He hides himself and survives the massacre. While he is in hiding, the leaders of Shechem gather at the great tree by the pillar and anoint their kinsman, Abimelech, as king. The thing Gideon had refused, his murderous son now seizes. When Jotham hears of this, he goes and stands on the top of Mount Gerizim, overlooking the city of Shechem, and he shouts down a parable, a fable that serves as a divine curse upon the new king and his subjects. It is the story of the trees who went out to anoint a king for themselves. They first ask the olive tree, a symbol of light, peace, and divine calling. But the olive tree refuses, saying, "Shall I leave my fatness, which is used to honor gods and men, to go and sway over the trees?" They then ask the fig tree, a symbol of sweetness, prosperity, and domestic peace. But the fig tree also refuses. "Shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit to go and sway over the trees?" Then they ask the vine, a symbol of joy and celebration. And the vine too refuses. "Shall I leave my wine, which cheers gods and men, to go and sway over the trees?" The noble, fruitful, and valuable trees all refuse kingship, preferring to fulfill their God-given purpose. Finally, in desperation, the trees turn to the most worthless of all plants, the bramble, a thorny, useless weed that produces no fruit and serves only to choke out good plants and start fires. "Come you," they say, "and reign over us." And the bramble, full of arrogance and bluster, accepts immediately. But he accepts with a threat. "If in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon." It is a ridiculous and ominous image. A tiny bramble bush offers no shade, only scratches, and its acceptance of power comes with the promise of destruction. A bramble is good for nothing but burning, and it threatens to burn down even the mighty cedars, the symbol of all that is majestic and strong. Jotham then applies the fable directly. He tells the people of Shechem that in their treachery against the house of Gideon, they have chosen the bramble, Abimelech, to be their king. And he pronounces the curse that flows from their choice. "Let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the leaders of Shechem. And let fire come out from the leaders of Shechem and devour Abimelech." He predicts a mutually destructive civil war, a reign that will consume itself in flames. Then Jotham flees, disappearing from the story. His curse comes true. For 3 years, Abimelech rules, a reign of terror built on a foundation of blood. But then God sends an evil spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem, and they begin to deal treacherously with him. The city that anointed him king becomes the center of a rebellion against him. The story descends into a brutal cycle of battles, ambushes, and massacres. Abimelech destroys the city of Shechem, sowing it with salt to make it permanently barren. He then pursues the remaining leaders to their stronghold, the tower of the temple of Balberith. He and his men cut down brushwood, pile it against the tower, and set it on fire, burning alive about 1,000 men and women. The Bramble King has fulfilled his promise. Fire has come out of him and devoured his own people, but his end is near. He goes to the next rebel town, Thebes, and as he approaches its tower to burn it as well, a woman on the top of the tower drops a millstone, a heavy circular stone used for grinding grain, directly on his head, crushing his skull. In a final act of pathetic pride, the dying tyrant calls to his young armor-bearer. "Draw your sword and kill me," he gasps, "lest they say of me, 'A woman killed him.'" The armor-bearer obeys and thrusts him through. And so the Bramble King, the son of Gideon, dies an ignominious death, brought down not by a great warrior, but by an unnamed woman and a piece of domestic equipment. The fire he started has consumed him. The biblical author provides the final theological summary. Thus God returned the evil of Abimelech, which he committed against his father in killing his 70 brothers. And God also made all the evil of the men of Shechem return on their own heads, and upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. The story of Gideon, which began with a mighty deliverance, ends here in a pile of rubble and ash, with the legacy of the great judge completely undone. The 40 years of peace he won for Israel were a prelude to one of the most vicious civil wars in their history. The ephod, the beautiful golden snare, did its work perfectly. It taught Israel to look to man and an object for their security. It fostered a climate where Gideon's own arrogant, royal pretensions could take root in his son. It led not to stability, but to a bloodbath that consumed his entire family. Gideon's life stands as a towering, tragic monument to a profound truth. A victory won by the hand of God can be utterly squandered by the pride of man. He was a man called from weakness and made strong. He was a man of great faith who demanded signs. He was a man of immense courage who acted in fear. He was a brilliant general who obeyed a suicidal battle plan. He was a humble servant who refused a crown, and a proud patriarch who named his son, "My father is king." He tore down his father's altar to Baal, only to build a golden snare that became an idol for the entire nation. He saved his people from an external enemy, but he failed to save them and his own family from the corruption within their own hearts. His story is a warning that echoes through the ages. It is not enough to win the war. The greater, harder, and more important struggle is to faithfully steward the peace that follows.